James Brantley Fine Arts Studios bring you Watercolor 101. We'll begin in about 60 seconds. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We're coming to you from James Brantley Studios in Opelika, Alabama. We hope that you will like this page, and if you do, please like us on Facebook. We'd also like to encourage you to share us with your friends, anyone that you know who may be interested in art. As we promised last week, what we're bringing to you today is Watercolor 101. James has a lot of people wanting to know how he paints these marvelous paintings, and so we've asked him to do 4 of these. We want to tell you what you can expect from Watercolor 101. Today, you're going to get the preliminaries. He's going to show you what kinds of brushes and paint and how to do some very basics in order for you to start watercolor on your own. And then in a couple of classes, he's going to teach you some brush techniques. And he'll tell you a little more about that and which brushes to use, but in a couple of weeks he'll do that. And then the last class, he's got some special things to do. And in the process of this whole event, he's going to be painting a picture as a demonstration, and you'll be able to see it. Now, if you would like us and follow us, you can go back and we will keep it pinned to the top of James Brantley Fine Art Facebook page, and you can go back and watch it on your own. Now, when you're finished with this class, you'll be able to paint the picture, and James will help you along. Now, we're live, and so if you have a question, please don't hesitate to write us, and we'll do our best to get the questions to James, and he can answer those for you. So here is James, and we can start with one piece of housekeeping we need to take care of, and that is drawing for the note cards. These note cards will be given away to some lucky person today. Now, if you'd like to purchase these, you can go to the jamesbrantley.net, and we do have a store there where you can purchase these. James, would you reach in here and pick out one of the answers, please? Okay, James, who is it?
Ruth from Opelika.
Okay, Ruth, we'll be contacting you by message, and we'll send these to you. We'll need to get a mailing address from you, and we'll be doing more of this later on. And by the way, I'm Roy Crow. I happen to be James's son-in-law, and I'm helping him with this. I hope you enjoy James's lesson. Here's James.
We're going to, in the next few sessions of this, we have 3 more. This one plus 2 more, I believe that's correct. We're going to talk about the very basics of watercolor, the mechanics, you might say. How do you put things together? How do you put the paint on the paper? What kind of materials do you use? What kind of brushes? What kind of paper? How do you prepare the paper? The techniques of putting the paint on and so forth. And I'm going to try to, there are really not that many different ways to apply the paint, and it just takes a little practice to get good at each one of them. And when you get through with the 4 sessions total, including the one last week, you should have the basic understanding of how things work. And then it's a matter of practicing. You have to practice at it, of course, before you get good at it. It's like anything else. If you're going to be a gymnast or a ballet dancer or anything else, you have to practice, and this is the same thing. There's so many people that, and I understand what they're saying, but they say, well, you're talented. And it sort of sounds like if you're talented, you just wake up one morning and you know how to do all this. It's not the way it works. You might have a person who was born or gifted with athletics, but they have to work at it. It's the same way with art. You might be born with a natural tendency to be able to do art, but unless you work at it, you're never going to get very good at it. So I believe that everyone can learn to do art and to make art, and I'd like to encourage you to try it. It just takes a little effort. We're going to talk about today, but to begin with, watercolor paper, and the way that we get the paper ready to work with. You don't need to do anything to it. Here is a piece of 300-pound rough paper, and it's thick enough that it doesn't need any stretching. And I'll talk to you about stretching and show you how that works here in just a minute. Watercolor paper, good watercolor paper, and I don't recommend that you use anything but good watercolor paper, is made from cotton, 100% cotton. And this 100% cotton paper will always be white. It won't yellow as with paper that's made from wood pulp. So always buy cotton paper, 100% cotton. It costs a little more, but we're talking about between $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 for a sheet of paper that you're going to turn into $1 million painting. So it's really not that expensive when you get it that way. And this 300-pound paper costs a lot more than the 140-pound paper. Now, for many years, I've used 140-pound paper and done what we call stretch it. Of course, common sense tells you you really can't stretch paper or you'll tear it. And what we do is we trick it into being bigger than it used to be. And I'll show you how to do that. This paper, the 300-pound, doesn't need any stretching. You can use it just like it is and it won't buckle. The reason that paper buckles when you put water on it is because the part you put the water on, if it's right here in the middle, it's going to expand. And so if this paper is one particular size and then you expand the middle of it, it's going to make a big bubble here. The 300-pound paper doesn't do that so much. That's why we can work with it without stretching it. But the thinner paper, like the 140-pound paper, it will. And so what we do is we make that paper as big as we can get it, and then we fasten the edges down so it can't go back to its original size. Therefore, it can't buckle since it's already as big as it can possibly get. And I'll show you a couple of things that I have tried over the years, and I'm still trying things to, does the camera see this tabletop here? Okay. Here's one way that I have tried stretching paper, and I'll wet the paper, it expands, then I clamp the edges down so that it cannot retreat or go back to its original size. And so I've sort of tricked the paper into being bigger than it was when I bought it. This is a rather cumbersome setup here. It's a piece of plywood, quarter-inch plywood, which I've drilled some holes, and I have these brackets here that I've screwed these wing nuts down on, and it's clamped it in place. After I did this, I realized that this is kind of awkward here, these big things sticking up here. And I'm going to go ahead and use this, and then when I get through with this, I'm going to do it a little bit different, and it's going to be like this. Here's a smaller one that I did, and I turned the wing nuts around, so I won't be putting my arms on those big old rough things sticking up. But this is not the way I normally do it. This is a way that I've tried, because I'm always trying different things, and you might want to try different things as well. If somebody could hand me a sheet of watercolor paper out of that sink over there, I'll show how this setup works. Here's a piece of quarter-inch plywood, and I have painted one side with white paint. I suppose you could use any color paint you want to. Thank you. The reason I painted it is because the color of the wood tends to leach into the paper when it's wet. So I've got this is a half sheet of watercolor paper. Watercolor paper comes in usually 22 by 30 size, or approximately. And I cut this one in half, and I've got a board that's the appropriate size to handle that. So I'm using an ordinary bath towel here to blot some of the water off of this. This paper's been soaking now for about, I say 10 minutes maybe, something like that. And so this paper is now as big as it can possibly get. You could soak it from now until the cows come home, and it's not going to get any bigger. When do the cows come home? Late in the evening usually, when they come in to get milk. So we're just going to put this, after I've dried it off a little bit, lay it out here on the board. And so this paper now will not expand anymore. It's got all the water that it can possibly hold. I just happen to have over here somewhere some pieces of, I didn't just happen to have, I should cut them ahead of time, pieces of tape that I use to do this stretching. Now this tape, let me reach over here and get this. This tape that I'm using is a linen tape, linen hinging tape. It is archival, and it's acid neutral, pH neutral, and you can leave it on your paper, or you can take it off, as I do sometimes later. It's made by a company called Linico. I've heard it pronounced Linico, but it's made of linen, so it makes sense to me to call it Linico. I've never heard anybody else pronounce it, so I'm going to call it Linico. And this works really well for holding the paper down. It's extremely strong once you get the paper down on the tape down on the paper. I'm going to dip this in water just for a couple of seconds. Take it out. I don't know if you can see that from where you are, but trust me, I dipped it in a bucket of water. And I'm going to put it on right on the edge of my paper, cover about, maybe 3/8 of an inch or so on the edge of the paper. And I'm going to press it down with my finger. Make sure the glue comes off this linen tape onto the paper. Sometimes when I finish painting, I'll simply take a razor blade and cut it off right here and leave the tape on the paper permanently. That's a good thing in a way, because it will strengthen the edge of the paper and lessen any chance of accidentally tearing the paper later on. Okay, you see how I'm rubbing it over and over? I want to make sure that glue is really good onto the wood and the paper as well. Take my second piece, soak it for just a few seconds. And I'll put it at the top. I'm lining it up with the edge, and I'm going to just drift it down just a little bit. Make sure it's straight. Careful at first, and you can rub a little harder after it gets stuck a little bit. This tape is so strong that sometimes, especially on a full sheet, the paper will attempt to shrink back to its original size. And when it does so, it will actually bow the plywood. It'll be slightly bowed, but it won't turn loose. It's really, really strong stuff. They use, the glue they use on this tape is an animal hide glue, rabbit skin glue, something like that, I believe, which is an old traditional glue from centuries ago. And I guess the best you can use. Rabbits don't like it much, but it works good for us humans. And when I finish this now, this piece of paper, it really won't be ready to work on yet unless you want to work on a wet sheet of paper. And I rarely work on a wet sheet of paper. You can if you want to. I'm going to show you a lot of things that I do, and maybe it's not what you want to do. That's okay. I'm just showing you how I do it. It works for me, and it may work for you if you'll give it a try. So get that on there really good. I've read in books, and I've seen in demonstrations where people use this brown paper tape. It doesn't work. I'll just go ahead and tell you, it's in the books, but it doesn't work. It won't hold. Plus, it's not an archival glue, and it's really not good for your paper. And it'll stain your paper brown, so don't try it. You can use this technique that I'm using right here. This works great. I think a roll of that tape cost about 10 bucks, but it'll do a whole bunch of sheets of paper. You can also use staples, and I used to, years ago, I just put staples real close together all the way around, all the way around. And that works. If you don't want to buy the tape, use staples. However, it's just a pain to get those staples out when you get through painting. Here you got a pocket knife and you're digging into the paper and you slip and tear your paper. Got a question to come in here from just Carol?
Carol Lawson.
Okay. It says, will it tear the paper when you take it off? That's a good question. It certainly will, unless you reverse it. Remember I said earlier, you might just want to cut it off. You can take an X-Acto knife or a razor blade and just cut it right along this edge here and just pick it up and leave it on the paper. But if I want to take the tape off the paper, I'll simply take a brush like this and I'll wet the brush in water, and then I'll just come on here and saturate this paper all the way around. And I'll do it over and over again. I'll let it soak. And when I do that, I can simply lift the tape off and it'll come right off and it doesn't tear the paper. But yeah, you can't take it off unless you do something like that to soften the glue back up. But I would say just take a razor blade and cut it loose and leave it on there. Okay, this is ready to go now. And I'm just going to set it aside. So I hope that answered your question, Carol. And if not, just fire in another one. We'll try to answer that as well. Let's talk about where you can get these materials. Now, I'm located in Opelika, Alabama, which is right next to Auburn. We're fortunate to have bookstores here that sell art supplies to the students. They usually have a pretty good selection of art materials. I like to shop at J&M Bookstore and Anders Bookstore in Auburn, and they have pretty much whatever I need. And there are also the chain stores like Hobby Lobby and Michael's. I believe there's a Michael's over in Columbus, not far from us here. And online, you can get pretty much anything you want from Dick Blick and also from Cheap Joe. They both have good materials, good selection, at good prices. And so it's not hard to find the stuff you need online. If you go online to Dick Blick or Cheap Joe's, you can get stuff to you in just a few days. And they have really good prices and a really good selection. So I would recommend any of those to you. Now, let's talk about getting your studio set up and getting things that you need arranged for easy access. My studio is, if you were to come in here and walk around, you would not see a really neat place. I'm not a really neat person. I do comb my hair every morning. But as far as my studio goes, I have stuff laying around that probably some of you might say, "Ooh, that looks kind of messy," but I don't care. It's right where I can reach it. I put my arm out there and grab it and pick it up. You're going to need a light source. You can use natural window light, and I do have north-facing windows over here on one side of my studio. But I work sometimes when the light's gone in the evening, and I use these lamps that you see here. Can you see those, Roy? Can you pick these up? I use these lamps. I have 3 of them set up here on stands. And I used to use ordinary screw-in incandescent bulbs. They give you a really yellow light. But now they've come out with the, what's corkscrew bulbs called? Are these, I don't know, you know what I'm talking about. The corkscrew bulbs looks like a twisted up noodle or something. And you can get them in white. And so it doesn't, when you look at your painting, you see white light, just like the sunlight. They're 5000K. You buy the 5000K bulbs. 5,000 Kelvin approximates sunlight at noon on a clear day. So I recommend you do get you a lamp that has, they're not hot. You see me touching the bulb here. It's hot, but it's not real hot. And so you don't heat yourself up while you're working. As far as a watercolor easel to use, you'll see right here in front of me is just a table, and it has a tilt top. I can raise this top up and down and get it like I want it. I like mine to be tilted slightly because I'll show you later on some of the techniques we use where you use gravity to make the water run downhill, make your wash run downhill. I have various kinds of watercolor easels. The main thing is that you need one that will tilt, so you can tilt it back and forth to suit yourself. Sometimes I use a hair dryer, ordinary hair dryer, to speed up the drying on a wash. Most of the time I don't fool with a hair dryer, but I do sometimes. I like to have it handy. Paper towels, you can't get by without paper towels. I recommend paper towels for I use it to cover my painting when I don't want to put my hand down on my picture. Also to blot up things, dry my brushes and so forth. I've got a big jug of water right here. Somebody asked me, why do you have that big jug of water there? I think it's an old pickle jar that used to be in a store. I like the biggest container of water for washing my brushes that I can get because your water doesn't get dirty quite as fast. If you use, and I've seen people do this, they'll use a little thing like this to put water in, and then of course after one washing your water is already dirty. So I use a big one like this. I'd get a bigger one if I could find one, but that's the size I use right now. The kinds of brushes that I use, I like to use sable brushes. They're the best that you can get. Now, they do make synthetic hair brush, and I have some of those. I mostly use synthetic brushes for mixing my paint because they're inexpensive, and I don't worry about wearing it out. Some of the brushes that I have, like a little brush like this little 3/0 brush, this little teeny tiny brush costs about $15. And so I don't want to be mixing my paint with this because it'll wear the bristles out, and I need it to make a really sharp point sometimes. And then your bigger brushes, one like this, a brush like this, if it's a red sable or if it's a Kolinsky brush, can cost you quite a bit of money. Brush size, if it's Kolinsky, could cost you well over $100. And one like this might cost you $35, $45, along in that range. But you can get them cheaper if you get the synthetic hair brushes. You can get them a lot cheaper than that. But do get the best brush you can afford, and it will all work. But on the smaller brushes, the little tiny brushes where I need it for a sharp point, I never buy anything but the Kolinsky hair brush. A Kolinsky is a little animal like a sable or a mink, and the hair comes from the tail of the animal, and it's they collect it in Siberia in the wintertime, believe it or not, from only the male animals. So the girl animals get off the hook. All right. Let's see. What about colors and paints? I use, let me just give you a list of them, what I consider minimum list for colors to use. And the paints that I use, I buy them in tubes like this. And this is a Da Vinci brand. I like them because you can get the big 37 milliliter tube, and they'll last a long time. I use, this is, what is this, raw lumber? I think this is raw lumber. I use, and you might want to write this down, but you can play this over again later if you don't get it. I use raw lumber and burnt umber. Raw lumber is a cool brown, and burnt umber is a warm brown. I use raw sienna, which is sort of a yellowish brown. I use burnt sienna, which is a very reddish brown. I use yellow ochre. I use cadmium yellow light, cadmium yellow medium, cadmium orange, and let's see, I use lamp black and ultramarine blue. Now you can use lamp black or you can use ivory black, depending on what, there's a slight difference in the two. but you might just buy one of each and see which one you like the best. I use cadmium red light, and I use cadmium red medium, and quinacridone rose or red. Now the quinacridone red or rose is for me a substitute for alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson is a beautiful reddish purple color, but it will fade with light. It's not very light fast. So I switched over to quinacridone rose, and it is it's permanent, and I get it the approximate same color. I also use sap green for my green. I have many other colors, but I would consider this to be a basic assortment of colors. Now, as far as the palettes go, a palette is simply something to hold your paint. And if you'll see here, I have, these are ceramic palettes. They're porcelain, and I like the porcelain. They make plastic ones like this, but the plastic ones will scratch and it's hard to clean them. They'll stain. But the porcelain palettes don't stain. They cost a little more, but they last a lifetime. You'll never use them up. And I store my paints in the round wells, and then I mix my paints in the slanted rectangular wells. And so you can see, let's see, let me take one of my cheap brushes here and I'll show you. I do not mix my colors I don't mix colors with my expensive brushes. I only use the cheap brushes for that. And I keep them mixed up. I add water to them every now and then to keep them the right density. And I'll tell you something else I use. I use pretty much anything that works. This is, believe it or not, and you know what this is already because we're looking at it. This is a deviled egg tray, and it works great for mixing colors. On the bottom, I have placed some little rubber feet under the bottoms of the wells, so when I set it down on my table, it doesn't slip around. And so this, whatever works, just anything that you happen to find that works. I sometimes will be in a store like World Market, somewhere like that, and I'll see a ceramic container, and I'll think, that's good for mixing paint. Here you see one right here. That's just something I picked up in, I think, World Market. I guess this is for sauce or something, but I use it for mixing paint. Just whatever works. You can use a saucer or a plate or anything like that. I don't like my colors to mix together unless I'm ready for them to mix together, and so that's why I use the ones with the separate wells in them. As far as the brands of paint you use, by the way, my brush, I didn't mention that. The best brush you can buy, if you're the richest man in the world, the best brush you can buy is a Series 7 by Grumbacher. They don't pay me to say that. I wish they would, but they don't pay me to say it, but it's just the truth. Series 7, and this is a Klinsky Sable brush, and it is absolutely the best brush you can buy, and they just perform wonderfully. People want to know, is it really worth money? Yes. I just can't overemphasize how much better these brushes are than anything on the market. There are probably brushes that work pretty well and maybe just as well, but you can't do better than this. Did I say they're by Grumbacher? Yes. I said the wrong word. They're by Winsor & Newton. Winsor & Newton brushes, Series 7. I have some Grumbacher brushes, and they're good brushes, but I like the Winsor & Newton Series 7. Some of my bigger brushes, in order to save money, I'll buy Red Sable instead of Klinsky, and they work just fine. I have all different kinds of paints. It depends on what town I'm in and what they have in the store. And most of the time I use the Da Vinci watercolor tubes because I can get the big fat 37 milliliter tubes. I have little small tubes like this. Van Gogh watercolors, they have good paint. I don't know, I have all different kinds. Here's Winsor & Newton paint, just various ones, depends on, there's another Van Gogh. Here's Here's American Journey by, these are made by Cheap Joe. Good watercolors. If you buy these, you're not going to go wrong. They make good watercolors. So just set out and get you a collection of things that you can start with, and you'll try different things, and then you'll find out what works best for you. Next time we come around, right? I'm going to start a painting for you. This is a photo that I took up in the Smoky Mountains a few weeks ago of the old mill at the Becky Cable area in Cades Cove. And so I'm going to show you how to get started on a painting. But in order to do that, I'll show you how to make some of the initial washes that you need to know how to do to be able to put it all together. Something like this is not hard to do. It's really pretty easy, actually. People sometimes get all frustrated and they say, well, I don't know how to draw. Yes, you do. You know how to draw. You just don't know it. When you were in first grade, teacher drew a picture on the board, or maybe kindergarten, wherever you learned, and there you have an A. And so what's the student's job? To draw a picture of an A. Okay, so you do it, and you're not too good at first, right? Because you're only 5 years old. You do the best you can, and then as you keep practicing, though, pretty soon you find that you're able to make an A just like the teacher, and then you'll come up with your own style. But drawing is no different. If you see something, a thing, it could be a wiggly line. An S is a wiggly line, so you draw a wiggly line. You're simply copying a shape. So drawing isn't all that hard. And what if it's something more complicated? Let's suppose it's a building. There you go. Now this is no harder than drawing an A. And then you add that, and everybody can do that. You add that, that's no problem. You add that part, you come straight down. And if somebody will walk you through it, you can go step by step, and you see it's really pretty easy to draw a picture of a house. Put windows in it or just whatever. This is an old mill that I used to draw, and I still draw a lot. And I believe it has windows over here too. So you just do one thing at a time, and what do you? Next thing you know, you got a house here. Put some boards on it. Sound like Bob Ross, don't I? Put some boards on it. Put you some land out there and some trees behind it. I am not going to say anything about happy trees. And maybe we got a road coming in front of it here like this, and a road like that, and so forth. Drawing is easy. Put a little shadow on one side, and the light's hitting up here, and a little bit of shadow right here. It's easy. And that's all you have to know how to do to be able to get the drawing going. And then I'll show you how to put the paint on. Put a wash on here and a wash on here, and then put some lines on it. Next thing you know, you've got yourself a painting of a building like this. So I'll show you how to do that next week along with the demo techniques. We'll be here at 4 o'clock at the same time next Sunday afternoon. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with me. You know how to get in touch with me. You can send me a message on Facebook, I believe, and I'll answer you back. If you have a question about materials or anything you need to know, just get back in with me, and I'll get back to you. So I'll see you here next Sunday at 4. I sure appreciate all of you watching, and I hope that we've learned something today.
Thank you for being with us, and we hope to see you again. And please do like us and share us on Facebook. And if there's anything we can do to help you with it, we'll be back again next Sunday at 4 o'clock. And until then, thank you a lot. Bye-bye.